Welcome to Mysteries to Die For and this toe tag. I am TG Wolff and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is normally a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. Today is a bonus episode that we call a toe tag. It's the first chapter from a fresh release in the mystery, crime, and thriller genre. Today's feature release is The Light Beside the Sea by Connie DiMarco. All right, today we are going to do the prologue and the first chapter. So let's jump in. The young man shivered in the cold storage unit. He rubbed his hands together briskly in an attempt to stay warm and keep his fingers flexible. He must remain steady to complete the delicate work required. A harsh overhead light flooded the space, illuminating from above, but leaving long shadows on the concrete floor. A work light clamped to the bench allowed him a clear view of the shards of pottery laid out before him. He breathed deeply, willing himself to concentrate. These pieces would need to be matched perfectly if these artifacts were to have any value at all. He'd been chosen for this task because of his craftsman-like ability, his extreme attention to detail, and his love of these objects. Each piece brought back, smuggled back actually, under great duress. He had no ethical objections as to how all these pieces, perhaps 200 when all was said and done, were retrieved from their native country. They would be well cared for, displayed and lauded. Museum-quality pieces, in fact. Far better here in the U.S., being restored in an anonymous storage space than lying in dust of a illiterate and superstitious population. He was sweating, in spite of the cold, but now at least his hands were steady as he gently lifted two pieces that promised to fit together perfectly. Some microscopic shards might be missing, but he was sure he could recreate this precious piece almost as it once was when it was first made. He wiped perspiration from his forehead with the sleeve and then rubbed his hands on a nearby towel. He pulled thin cotton gloves over his fingers and with the back of his wrist pushed up his eyeglasses. He was hungry and tired, but he didn't want to stop. This work was too important. If done perfectly, it would ensure his own success at the university. Nothing would stand in the way of his doctorate now. He moved a magnifying glass on a flexible arm closer, studying the two pieces of pottery carefully. He smiled in relief. Even the tiny grooves would mesh perfectly. An odor assailed his nose, breaking his concentration. He looked around the utilitarian space. Was something burning outside the unit? Some substance that gave off a strange, pungent odor? Who knew what went on in a place like this? A warehouse of impersonal, rented spaces. For all he knew, people were living here, hunkered down in gritty storage units. He pushed away the thought that these precious items could be in danger from some idiot. Perhaps a homeless person had started a fire to stay warm. Could be anything. He shook his head to drive the thought from his mind and refocused on his work. The smell became stronger. He pulled his eyes away from the magnifying glass and looked around. He was alone in the small space, but couldn't escape the feeling of a presence nearby. A shiver ran up his spine. Nerves, he thought. He was imagining things, but he hadn't imagined that odor. He turned back to his task and shuddered as if fingers had stroked the back of his neck. His heart was racing. He took a deep breath and willed himself to concentrate once more. He was really imagining things. As he bent to the task, he felt it again. Something was here. Something was in this space. His hands began to shake. He gently placed the two pieces of pottery on the workbench and stood up, pushing the rolling chair away. He rubbed his eyes. Was that a sound? Perhaps a rat? He shivered uncontrollably. His nerves were getting the best of him. Perhaps he was too exhausted to do the job he needed to do. He should return in the morning after a good night's sleep. That and a decent meal. His eyes swept the space. The odor was gone now, dissipated. But still, he couldn't shake the impression he was being watched, that someone or something was quite close to him. Something quite unpleasant. He He pulled off the fine cotton gloves and straightened the small workbench. He couldn't admit it to himself, but he was spooked. It was more than exhaustion or hunger. Something was wrong. What it was, he couldn't put a name to, but perhaps tomorrow, in the light of day, he could shake this feeling. He switched off the work light and pushed the magnifier away. The overhead light left long shadows around the space, empty except for his small work area and a few crates. Yes, he thought, his imagination was working overtime. There was no one here, no one in the unit with him. He shook his head to dispel the feeling. He grabbed his jacket and backpack, fishing his car keys out of his pocket, and lifted the corrugated metal door to the corridor. Blinded temporarily by the bright neon lights, he glanced in both directions. Empty, not a soul at this hour. He flicked the switch inside the storage unit, plunging it into darkness, and stepped out. He closed and locked the entrance and headed down the hallway to the exit door. A sudden chill ran up his spine. He turned quickly only to face a deserted hallway. He regretted his decision to leave, but it was too late to go back now. If he was honest with himself, there was no way he wanted to be locked in that storage room. Not tonight. He had to get out of here. A panicked feeling rose in his chest. He hurried down the long corridor, almost in a trot. He'd be fine, he thought, if he could just get to his car. Only a few yards from the rear exit, it would take only a moment or two. He pushed through the outer door and took a deep breath in the chill of the night air. He felt better immediately. Nothing was wrong. He was just exhausted. He hurried across the concrete parking area and pushed the fob to unlock his car. He glanced back at the brightly lit doorway just as he exited. A man stood by the doorway under a glaring outdoor light. A large, bare-chested man with dark skin, his torso covered in markings, glyphs or tattoos that ran over the skin of his body, trailing up his neck, his face painted with black and red vertical stripes. Dark eyes burned deep in a solemn face. A heavy collar of feathers, beads, and animal claws circled his neck. A chill ran through him again. The stranger looked like a medicine man, a shaman of sorts from the jungles he had visited not too long ago. What was this strange creature doing here, in San Francisco? It wasn't just his imagination. Someone had been close all along, had followed his progress down the corridor. The man's black eyes stared directly at him. A deep sense of fear overwhelmed him. Panicking, he wrenched his driver's door open. His world went black as a blow struck. The tattooed man was the last thing he would ever see. Chapter 1. Julia. Michael, are you home? The phone almost slipped from my hand. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been, how anxious I was for my fiancé to return. Where are you, at the airport? I'll come pick you up. No need. I'm at the apartment. I hitched a ride with one of the guys. His voice became deeper. I want to see you. There's so much I have to tell you. Can I come right over? Yes! Warmth flooded my entire body, a deep sense of relief that he was out of the foreign jungles and safe at home. Absolutely! Hurry! Be there before you know it. And that was the last conversation you had with Michael. Paula, my therapist, leaned back in the wing chair, her hands resting on her lap. I nodded. The last time we spoke. I glanced over at her. Paula, an elegant woman, is tall and slender, always dressed in a casual but upscale fashion. Today she wore a pale cream silk blouse that tied at the neck with a loose pair of gray slacks. Her dark, almost jet black hair was pulled into a bun at the nape of her neck. Slender silver earrings dangled from her ears. I was a bit surprised to get your call, Julia. It's been quite a while since you've come in. Isn't the anniversary coming up soon? As usual, my therapist was right on target, remembering the day of my fiancé's death. The day he promised me he would be there in a few minutes, but never arrived, struck down by a hit-and-run driver outside his apartment in the Sunset District. You have an amazing memory, Paula. I smiled. Of course, I'm supposed to, she smiled in return. How are you feeling? I shrugged. Much better than a year ago. Still just adjusting, coping, I guess. I hesitated. Sometimes I feel like I haven't made much progress, but then there are days when I don't miss him as much. Days I forget for a little while. That's called healing, she said, and it's a very long process, at least for those of us who are conscious and in touch with their feelings, and I know you are, certainly. I scratched my fingernail against the rough fabric of the couch, a nervous gesture. Is there anyone else, by chance? She asked. Are you dating anyone? I laughed mirthlessly. No. I decided not to spend our hour talking about someone I had met a year before who turned out to be a disaster. A serious disaster. Someone I'd been attracted to, but the outcome was anything but romantic. Well, that's fine, she said. Whenever you're ready, sometime not too distant future, I hope. She studied my face. Are you marking this anniversary in any way? I'm planning to spend the day with my grandmother, I said. I've been so busy with clients and all sorts of things, and I feel as if I've been neglecting her. We'll take the ferry to Sausalito for brunch and shopping. That's the plan, anyway. Will this bring back memories? Paula asked. Oh, you mean being on the bay? Scattering Michael's ashes? No, not particularly. I don't think so. Those feelings are with me all the time. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. It's the not knowing that really eats at me. Not knowing who is driving the car. Not knowing if the person is haunted by what they did. And now, as I told you, reading Michael's journal a few months ago, I trailed off. From his trip to Guatemala. What's changed? Paula asked. I always accepted that a hit and run was an accident. I never questioned it, I said. Just a horrible accident with the driver still not identified and charged. But now, finally reading his journal, there were a lot of strange things happening during that trip. Michael was worried someone was trying to steal his journal. There was another death, too. One of the other grad students died from a fall in a cave. Michael wrote about it. There was a lot of tension and anger between those people for various reasons. And it made me think... What? Paula asked. What if it wasn't an accident, that hit and run? What if it was deliberate? Paula sighed heavily and leaned back in her chair. Oh, Julia, I don't know what to say. You think I'm imagining things? Obsessing? Paula didn't respond. Maybe I am. I don't know. I rubbed my forehead. I just don't know. Paula glanced at the small clock she kept next to her chair. I'm so sorry, Julia, but our time is up. But I'd really like you to come back next week if you could. Same time? I think, whatever the reality, this is something we need to work through. I pulled my thoughts back from the image of Michael lying dead in a street. What? Oh, yeah, I guess that would be good. Okay then, Paula smiled. I'll see you next week. I gathered up my purse and jacket and said goodbye, wandering down the corridor to the elevator. My thoughts were elsewhere. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside, struggling to remember which parking level I was on. P2 sounded familiar. I pressed the button, and when the doors opened, I stepped into a deserted concrete space. Deserted of people, but jam-packed with cars. I located my little red Geo and climbed inside, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. Maybe I was obsessing. No, make that definitely obsessing. What do you do when you're haunted by the past? Memories like tendrils that rise from the ground and encircle your legs and lungs and heart. They won't let go until you have answers. To be grief-stricken is one thing. Some blessing from the universe allows you to move on, eventually, when you have answers. But the not knowing. When people talk of closure, I want to snarl. Paula once said there is no such thing as closure. The pain recedes from daily consciousness, but we are never finished with death. My name is Julia Bonatti. Julia Elizabeth Bonatti, and I'm an astrologer. I give guidance to others. I study natal charts. I make predictions and do my best to allay the fears of my clients, fears of change, and fears of the future. I study character development and cycles over time. And here I was, for all my knowledge, stuck in my own damn past. All right, that is the prologue and first chapter of The Light Beside the Sea, a Zodiac Mysteries mystery by Connie DiMarco. So here is my review. The Light Beside the Sea is a cozy mystery. Julia Bonatti is an astrologer who gives advice to others to allay fears of change in the future, yet she is stuck in her own past, one that won't lie quiet. A few short years ago, her fiancé, Michael, as y'all just heard, was killed in a hit and run as he returned from an archeological expedition. Now it comes to light that he wasn't the only grad student related to the project or the professor who has died. The latest was just days ago. Now Julia is asking questions. By solving one death, she may just be able to provide closure on them all, even though closure doesn't exist, according to Paula. Bottom line, The Light Beside the Sea is for you if you like cozy mysteries with a touch of the unexpected. All right. So Julia is our narrator, and she's the detective in the story. You know, one of the first challenges with any amateur sleuth mystery is how to inject the detective. In this case, Julia actually had multiple points of entry. She was invited through the grieving of wives and girlfriends for the other dead people, as well as the bad guy directly. Julia isn't a pushy, nosy type sleuth as many cozy sleuths are, but what she does do is find doors that are open or open ajar, and then goes through them rather than forcing her way through. She's an easy character to like and respect. And this is Julia's fifth story, so she's a very well-developed character. She doesn't come off two-dimensional at all. She's gained experience and we'll call it dimensionality over the last books, and so she is a good character, a good lead character. The main story is a mix of mystery and conspiracy. The older deaths were officially closed as accidents, not homicides, although you could argue that hit and run is a homicide, but you all know what I mean. The newest death, though, is undeniably murder. Through the stories told by the loved ones of the deceased, her fiancé Michael's notebook, and a few experts in their field, Julia pieces together the events and motivations until she unearths some pretty shady characters. Julia is consistent and true to herself in her actions, and you all know how I love to look at the logic of the story. And, this is now the 54th toe tag, and after reading mysteries to do reviews, plus just loving reading mysteries, I've really come to an awareness that a lot of the logic of a story is tied more to the bad guy's actions than the good guys. Part of that trick being that we only see glimpses of the bad guy through their actions, whereas the good guys, we normally know what's going on. This one, I get to the back of the book and I look to the beginning and I am left with a few questions. And again, it's not on Julia's part. Her actions are clear and consistent. But when you kind of get to the end and you're like, well, what about this? It comes back to what the motivation, style, and actions were of the bad guy. The subplots have the zany elements that readers look for in a cozy. Julia's grandmother's next-door neighbor, yes, that's right, Julia's grandmother's next-door neighbor has disappeared just as her daughter was forcing her from her home into a faraway elder care facility. And then there is the drama with the staff at the Mystic Eye bookstore with Rupert and the woman who he cares for. So 3 storylines woven together. The pacing of the book is fairly fast, with Julia hopping between the main and side storylines. And that's really where the pacing comes from. She's juggling a lot. Individually, the stories unfold at a stepwise pace. The astrology cozy element, it's fresh and at times highly technical. I will not claim that I understood all of the explanations that Julia gave to her clients, but they were interesting and they were certainly a take on the cozy that I hadn't seen before. There's a wonderful element of mysticism above and beyond Julia's chosen path. You saw a little bit of that here in the prologue. Sorry, Lucy's in the house with me and she's having a little puppy fit. Overall, this was an entertaining read. Fans of the cozy genre who are looking for a fresh take should check out Julia Bonatti and the Zodiac Mystery Series. The Light Beside the Sea is promoted by Partners in Crime Tours and is available from Amazon and other booksellers, however you want to say it. You just can't say sellers and retailers at the same time because then it comes out to tailors and doesn't make any sense. About Connie DiMarco, allow me to introduce the author of the Zodiac Mysteries, featuring San Francisco astrologer Julia Bonatti, a woman who never thought murder would be part of her practice. The Light Beside the Sea is the 5th novel in the series. Writing as Connie Archer, she is also the author of the best-selling Soup Lovers Mysteries from Penguin Random House. You can find her excerpts and recipes in the Cozy Cookbook and Mystery Writers of America Cookbook. Connie is a member of Mystery Writers of America, International Thriller Writers, Crime Writers Association, UK, and Sisters in Crime. Partners in Crime Tours represents a network of 300-plus bloggers offering tailor-made virtual book tours and marketing options for crime, mystery, and thriller writers from around the world. Founded in 2011, PICT offers virtual book tour services for well-established and best-selling authors, as well as those just starting out their careers. PICT prides itself on its tailored packages for authors with a personal touch from tour coordinators. For more information, check out their website, partnersincrimetours.com. All right, join us next week for Season 8, Games People Play, when our favorite, maybe detective, is back with another misadventure. It's Detective Connolly in Rock, Paper, Scissors, Shoot by Jack Wolff. All right, Jack, take us out.